which are the things that matter in relation to banks and NBFCs, and where to find them in the BRSR report directly without getting very technical about it. That's what this section is about. Examining the characteristics. We are talking about environment, social and governance issues. And governance is pretty much common to all industries. Every company is expected to have a high standard of governance, but there are certain business conduct matters which are specified in BRSR for which we will look at the dimensions of governance. But let's just look at environmental factors in the banking and NBFC space. Now, the score for environment is relatively low, and a leading rating agency from India a couple of years ago said that therefore everything is more or less fine with this sector. And as we drill down, we will see that there's more to it than just that. The primary reason for a low score on environmental issues is because there is no core manufacturing, but that does not mean that the sector does not have an environment footprint. Taken together with the next largest sector in the Indian economy, which is the IT and software services sector in this top 1000 listing, they might have another 10 to 15% weightage, going by which, per that rating company's statement, 2/3 of India or 60% of India is green, and all you need to do is come down onto the road from that very rating agency's office and drive maybe for a kilometer to know the seriousness of the environmental issues that we have. Setting that aside, let's move into social factors. So yes, the banking industry has very, very low consumption of materials. So when you look into the income statement of banks, materials purchased is not a line item. People are a huge line item. So people score big. When we look at business conduct issues, yes, business conduct issues, particularly the factors mentioned in the BRSR report, are huge. And we are going to drill down into each of these to understand why this is what the meter looks like. To be sure, this is not a highly scientific, well-polled derivative, but it is well founded in knowledge of the industry, as you will see in a moment. So the overall score for the sector banking and NBFC is somewhat like halfway. It's not extremely critical, but it's not going to get a green pass in our analysis either. So let's delve into those dimensions, starting with environment. Why is it a borderline between green and amber and not outright green? So yes, there's no production involved in this sector, so you don't have all the complexities associated with manufacturing. It does not also consume water and release polluted water like industry might. And biodiversity is not an issue because if at all there is a bank branch in a Kaziranga National Park kind of a place, it's going to be at most an ATM or an extension branch. So there are no severe issues posed by bank branches to biodiversity the way a factory might. So this sets the score green for this sector. And here is what some analysts might miss. Buildings. Banks have huge corporate offices, huge operation centers, the largest in this country, definitely do. And huge number of regional offices and a vast number of branches. One State Bank of India has over 16,000 branches. So when I add all those buildings together, and what might be the quality of those buildings, I get a large, what's called embodied emissions for buildings. I get a large volume over there. Now, that might have been a blind spot to those who look at the sector, but in the current state of sustainability studies, there is absolutely no scope for such a blind spot. There it is staring at us in the face. Not all the businesses are, not all the offices are owned, so that if I own an office, I can make sure that it's a green building. Oftentimes, a bank gets a license to open a branch in a particular location, and then there are only limited amounts of property available over there, and they rent what they can get. And that building, that landlord might not have made the most environmentally friendly building. So maybe based on this going forward, we will see banks imposing conditions on people that want the bank as a tenant. So a bank as a tenant is considered to be a great tenant to have, which means the tenant can put pressure on the landlord to meet some green standards. And then e-waste. Now, e-waste may be a slightly smaller issue, but it's a definite issue with banks, which is all the computer monitors, all the keyboards, all the mouses, all peripheral devices, servers, phones, name all the electronic items that a bank uses or any modern day office uses. What do they do with it at the end of its life? Does it end up in a landfill to be scavenged by a kid looking for precious metals in the bits and pieces, or is it responsibly disposed? This features and is a factor in the BRSR report, is a section in the BRSR report. Socially, when you look into the income statement of any bank, salaries are their largest point of expense. And then if that's a major expense item, then that points to the large workforce that the entities have, and therefore workforce related issues feature in a very big way with banks. The next, many banks have either their own subsidiaries where they outsource certain low value add tasks, or they outsource it to a third party. And the BRSR report looks for what might be the working conditions of the people that work in a contracted or an outsourced environment relative to the own workforce. In social factors, one of the very big issues is customer data, which in banking is huge because the bank takes the maximum amount of data from its customers on account of KYC and has all the financial data of its customers at its fingertips. So customer data, its privacy and its security is a huge issue with banks. Finally, consumer issues. Since banks call customers and sell them financial services and products of different kinds, the quality of that interaction, the quality of that service, the risk of mis-selling, these are all factors that feature in a significant manner in banking. And there are time and again enough cases of customers feeling aggrieved by what a bank has rendered to them by way of service. Undoubtedly, there are mechanisms in the Reserve Bank of India scheme of things, including what's known as the Ombudsman, to resolve issues that customers face, but the BRSR report asks that a particular bank report on the issues that were raised by its customers, or indeed by the regulator. Finally, business conduct. Fines and penalties levied by any regulator on the organization is the best indicator of the standard of conduct of that particular entity. Conflicts of interest. In banking, conflicts of interest is a serious issue, much larger than in any other industry. For instance, while giving a loan, Is any person in the bank or its management or its board interested in the borrower who has approached for loan? Recently, we have seen, a few years ago, the top management of a particular private sector bank was charged, a senior manager from that bank was charged in a conflict of interest case where it was felt that her spouse had an interest in an entity that took a loan from the same bank. That's one of the outstanding examples of a potential conflict of interest. The matter is not judged, but that the matter is being pursued is noteworthy in and of itself. So, conflict of interest is a big deal in banking. And then follows from that how much training is provided on ethics and business conduct and so on and so forth. That is one of the points that BRSR asks to see. And finally, banks are not here to lend to weaker sections of society and kiss the money away. So a bank might respond to that by engaging in corporate social responsibility related activities, and there is information to be received on that from the BRSR report. Now, looking at all these factors, the sector by itself may not be high on the environment or social agenda, but when you look at specific factors over here, particularly customer data, consumer issues, conflicts of interest, e-waste, and the people in the bank, these are some of the issues that merit deep study. When we look at the Indian economy as a whole, banking sector might not be the biggest problem that we want to analyze. But if you are a bank, then what else do you have to do except look at those issues which are relevant in your shop?